Welcome to Talking Technology with NCBI Labs, where we believe that technology is the single greatest enabler for people with sight loss and all disabilities. If you are interested in the latest technology news, products, and innovations, then you've come to the right place.
Hello, and you are very welcome to today's episode of Talking Technology with NCBI Labs, which brings us up to episode number 13 in the current series. So if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you may have noticed some new introduction music to the show today. It even has an American voiceover. Well, the introduction music may have changed, but we're still here to bring you all the latest news and technology trends for people with sight loss. And in that regard, certainly today is no different. So joining me on the show today on our panel is Sean Doran. Hello, Sean. It's good to have you with us.
Hi, JP. Nice to be here again.
What's up, Sean? Along with two very special guests, we have Alan Kiernan from Cation Consulting. Hello, Alan.
Hi, JP. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us, Alan. And also David Redmond from the NCBI Live project. So hello, David. So
hello, how are we?
Hello, David. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to have you with us, David. So what do we have coming up for you in the show today? Well, in this week's episode, we are first going to be speaking with Alan, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Cation Consulting. So based in Dublin, Cation develops software that runs on Amazon Web Services, or AWS, and Alan is going to be telling us about the work that Cation did to develop the My NCBI Smart Hub, their work with other organizations, and how voice activation has come to change really our day-to-day lives. So after that, our attention is going to turn to the very recent launch of NCBI Live, which is Ireland's very first radio station for blind and vision impaired listeners. So the station itself draws on the very best of NCBI's most recent audio content and impressively broadcasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And telling us all about NCBI Live and how we can tune in is one of the creators, David Redmond, all to come up on the show today. So lots to look forward to. As always, if you have any questions or would like to leave a comment, please feel free to do so in the Q&A panel right here in Teams, or send an email to labs@ncbi.ie and we'll make sure to get right back to you. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our very first guest in the show, Alan Kiernan from Cation Consulting. Hello, Alan, and again, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks, JP.
Great that you're here. Now, I'm actually in the very fortunate position where Sean has worked very closely with you, Alan, on various projects in the past, including, of course, the My NCBI Smart Hub. So at this point, I'm actually going to hand us over to Sean, who will hopefully ask you a few questions about yourself and the work that you do at Cation.
Yep.
And then the first question, Alan, is how do you pronounce Cation?
Cation, as in Cation. Yeah. It's a physics.
Lucky guess.
Because I know everyone always goes 50-50 on that there, so I just wanted to make sure.
It's where we planned that, just at the conversation starter.
So it's just normally like an introduction at this stage, like if you give us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got here and the kind of work that you do.
So thanks. So yes, I'm Alan Kiernan. I'm a co-founder of Cation. So what are we? We're a cloud consultancy company in that, in terms of offerings, first of all, we're AWS partner consultants. We're also Amazon Alexa consultants as well, and we provide cloud native, as in built on the cloud but for the cloud, solutions across what is traditional systems engineering, which is sort of infrastructure and operational space, also solutions engineering, which is in building software products, and we specialize deeply in the nice area of conversational AI, which is indeed what led us to work with the NCBI in the first place.
Exactly. And Alan, when you were talking about sort of cloud consultancy and AWS, so Amazon Web Services, like what does all that mean? Because a lot of people mightn't even know what cloud consultancy might entail.
So if we look at it in terms of when someone uses the internet, what are they actually doing? They're effectively running a program of some description against a piece of hardware somewhere. that hardware traditionally lived in a data center. It's a room full of servers and network equipment and all sorts of other stuff. And we used to term those things as server farms back in the 90s. And then around, I guess, 2008, whenever Amazon launched Amazon Web Services, they were one of the first companies to really do a good job around allowing other companies to use their data centers. And that's sort of the nugget of what is the cloud. It's actually a bunch of data centers. And not only in terms of using the hardware, but they provide, let's think of them as value-added services. So people can, like ourselves, can develop software products or systems, securely, quickly, in a manner that's quite cheap to run when it's done efficiently. That's well protected in terms of security. That's guaranteed to run 24/7. And so all of the traditional costs you might have in running a data center are part of the product you buy when you use the likes of AWS or indeed Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Compute or whatever. So that's the nugget of it. So we talk about cloud, talk about AWS. Really, we're talking about loads of data centers with kind of smart software and services running that help us run, whether they be websites or mobile applications or what have you, which help us run those things in a very well managed way.
So anyone who's worked in a bank or an office or something like that, there used to be a back room with a couple of computers chugging away, heating up the entire room. They're done away with now, and they're replaced online in a cloud that we can actually have a server up there instead of taking up space within your building.
Yeah, and indeed, it just removes that overhead, in terms of having somebody to run all that stuff for you.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's actually cost saving. And like when you say sort of like solution engineering or solutions like that, how do you approach that? Like someone has to come to you with a problem first, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly it. So someone comes with a problem statement, and we start to work through, what is the optimal solution for that problem and for that problem and for that company, taking into account the company's, think of it as their technology culture, how they like to operate and run things. And every company will have its own, collective philosophy about what is good hardware, what is good software, and so forth. I don't normally get well-defined standards, but nevertheless, we have to sort of deal with them in terms of, what's right for you, what's right for your company, and then with that, sort of absorb what the problem statement is. And in our case, because we're a build for the cloud, running the cloud company, we will help them define a solution that satisfies all of their both functional requirements in terms of here's what they must do, and non-functional requirements in terms of here's how it must run and so on, and do them in an Amazon-centric way. So really what that means is all of those sort of magical services we spoke of earlier, in terms of making an application respond and all of the things behind that. So things like how to process messages and store data and retrieve data and provide security and all that kind of stuff. Like, we do them in an Amazon-centric way. So we solution around that to ensure that the customer gets is something that's quick to implement, that's reliable, secure, low cost, and guaranteed to run. So that's where we define the solution, then find how we're going to run the solution, and adhere to all of those sort of well-defined standards and requirements.
And probably like you're probably introducing this technology to people who haven't come across it before, especially with Amazon Web Services and things like that. Most people still think Amazon only sell books online.
Yeah, no, Amazon Web Services themselves are a massive company. Like they're a serious hitter globally in terms of services. And if you think about the services that you may use day to day, like things like Netflix. Netflix runs on Amazon Web Services. You never see that, never hear about it, but that's one of the largest streaming networks in the world, and it's running on top of AWS. So that's the scale that the likes of AWS run on, as per the likes of a Ryanair and Audible and so on. They'll run on top of AWS.
And like speaking of Ryanair, there you actually have implemented some work with them and some other companies along these lines also, haven't you?
Correct. Yeah. So with Ryanair, we are the front door for the customer services in terms of the conversational AI interfaces, and that's a really good example of where we can leverage Amazon or cloud technologies to deliver something very fast, where our conversation solution, which is a product on its own basis, but it operates across social channels, it operates across Twitter and Facebook, also web widgets, also voice, and it operates in 7 languages simultaneously, and it's just that power to deliver more features and more functionality at a low cost, which helps really show off the benefits of operating in the cloud.
Absolutely, and with the likes of those products, like it's all from, well, a lot of it's from that conversational interface, that conversational AI, or so a lot of your products will have that kind of feature where you're actually speaking to or interacting with someone, but not really someone on the other end.
Correct. So actually, the problem statement there is really, especially in the likes of a customer support space or an information knowledge base. So first of all, if we do 2 things, if we don't think of customer support as being, the traditional answer my question or give me a list of options, think of it more in terms of intelligent natural language, and also think of other use cases. So in the likes of RSA 123, we provide their concierge conversation AI when you're buying your motor insurance as well, and that's another example of where we're assisting somebody with their journey as opposed to having to try and read tons of documentation or call support or whatever it may be. But really what we're doing there is fundamentally we're taking a user who has a question to an answer or some action with the least amount of friction that we possibly can. So if I want to say to the likes of Ryanair, how do I check in? I shouldn't have to start searching documentation for that. I should just ask that question, and then this in conversation AI intelligent software understands, okay, he means he needs to know how to do this thing, or do this action, and then that action is, okay, give him the data, give him the information how he checks in. That's the lowest point of friction, and that's fundamentally what everything on conversation AI is based upon: understanding what the user is asking, and performing some task to deliver the right result. And that result can be give them an answer to a question, perform some action downstream. And we've oodles of examples, Sean, of this within the Smart Hub, for example. That's exactly the fundamentals of how the Smart Hub operates.
Exactly, and I know, like, we had Kyron and Adela on here a few podcasts ago, and we spoke a lot about the Smart Hub and that there, and obviously yourself and Cation were instrumental in that there. And for us, it was a huge project, and it's one of those projects that when you work on, it becomes much bigger than you think it is. And like you were only great with us there, because if I was dealing with me on that one, I would have thrown me out the window. But because likes of the FAQ, everything, it was such a big undertaking. Like, how did you go about sort of implementing something like the Smart Hub?
So I'll start off by saying, don't sell yourself short. but no, I mean, look, fundamentally, when you do anything of this nature, you really want to start with the user and work backwards. You really want to define, what is the best possible user experience here, and what is the user experience that we want to provide, and what's the system want to provide. So with yourselves, and I have to take my hat off and give you guys compliments for being such a forward-looking team on this as well. You always, the requirements will always change when you deal with a conversational platform, because the more you use it, the more you become familiar with it, and you understand what feels right, what works well in terms of a conversational state. So if you consider having a structured conversation between 2 people, so let's say the barista in the cafe and the person buying the coffee, if you play the same task 100 times, you'll find there's a really often way for that conversation to take place, for the user to ask for coffee, for the barista to follow up in terms of what data they need to gather to make the coffee, to take payment, and so on and so forth. And so as ourselves collectively, like ourselves plus the NCBI team, work through what's the right user experience for the NCBI. We found iterations of that, of course, because there's a lot of complex data in there. There's a lot of very domain specific data. There's a lot of specific terminology. But there's also the sense of how do we best deliver this to the customer. So one, it's easy to ask for and find, and 2, it fundamentally makes sense. It's the right answer, and the right answer is like the Goldilocks porridge: not too hot, not too short, and not too cold or not too long either. So really finding that measure, so iterations take place. So in dealing with a project, so we start off with a we're lucky we've done many projects like this, so we have kind of a project framework to work through in terms of how we've discovered these projects can be set up and efficiently gathered the best to get us started. So we walk through these conversational plans. So the example of if a service user asks this question, what does that mean? First of all, what do they want to understand? How do we get them the answer? And then we start building through what are all the possible outcomes of that conversation and what are the twists and turns of that conversation. And I think that's for the likes of the Smart Hub, when we ask for information about a condition, or indeed we ask for technology support. They're very different conversation journeys, but they're very well tuned based on our collective planning around that, collective testing around it.
Absolutely, and like from our point of view, looking at something like the Smart Hub and having it on Amazon Alexa or Google Home or that kind of voice interaction, like we know from just years of experience in NCBI that we can teach anyone how to use technology, how to use screen readers, how to use magnification. We can access information, but there is a learning curve that we have to train people on how to use that, and we always can and always will. But voice interaction just seemed like a path of least resistance for someone who might be new to sight loss. In this case, they've instant access to information through these voice interactions. Like, is that something that you thought about when you were building these things before speaking with us? Did you have that kind of scope for accessibility?
Yeah, so I want to say we did. I'm actually so I'm going to give you an origin story here, a true to God honest origin story. The first time I saw Alexa being used was in Dublin before the device was released. I'm an active part of the Amazon Web Services user group in Dublin, which is a really good user group. If anybody ever wants to tune in to learn about Amazon in general or Amazon Web Services in general, and through a complete short-term, I'm going to call it a fluke. There was a gentleman with a sight loss condition who was in contact with the organisers of the group, and Alexa was just going through this launch cycle. There's lots of hype about it, and he was curious as to what Alexa would mean to him. So the group's organisers, actually he happened to be in Dublin at the time, so he agreed to come out to the meetup. He agreed to stand up on stage and just give his thoughts on where this would go. And honestly, that was a light bulb moment for me in terms of this is so significant and such a fundamental game changer for use of technology that it really can't be ignored. And it's on a par. And another one of these sort of light bulb moments or use cases is text messaging. So text messaging, when it came out first, was a game changer for anybody who had any sort of a
hearing impairment. Exactly.
It was, oh my God, everyone has these devices. They're easy to acquire, and now we can unlock the potential. So it was exactly that moment, and that naturally led into hang on, this is conversation AI in general. The underpinning technology for this is common, whether it's voice or text or messaging or social. It's all the same fundamental technology behind the scenes. So it was kind of a door opener there in terms of this stuff is significant. This stuff is brilliant,
And that's important, like from our point of view, because you often hear universal design getting mentioned, and kind of it's not given any real credence. But something like conversational AI or a smart speaker, it's purely that kind of universal design where it's not like, here is a product built for someone with sight loss in this example, and therefore it's bespoke and therefore it's going to cost a lot of money. This is universal. It's built in mind with everyone, and it's the price that everyone else pays. And our phones have gone that way. We all have screen readers and magnification built into our phones. So our televisions have magnification and screen readers built into them now. It's a fantastic. So universal design is fantastic. That no one's told you have to buy a particular product only suited to you, and then you end up paying a lot of money for that. So that's something we are very cognizant about while looking at this technology. How universal is it? And like I said, between hearing loss or someone with a speech impediment can actually download a certain app, which will then link in and help them communicate with smart devices. There's a way to access this all in all, which is fantastic. And I suppose it kind of that kind of leads us into like, where can this technology go? I mean, like, I know you have like Parlay, you do so much work in conversational AI. Like, is there a horizon that we have to go past yet, or is there a cutoff point? Have we hit a ceiling, or can this go further?
No, so we definitely haven't hit a ceiling, but the way the technology tends to evolve is, whenever you have this, this concept of a hype cycle, and something new comes out, it's always media and it's discussed, everyone's trying to use it, and then it kind of falls back into the natural evolution of technology in terms of, here's these cases where it works really well for. So I think we haven't quite hit that natural evolution piece just yet. Certainly the aspirations for voice tech in general aren't the same as they were like 5 years ago. So aspirations are long term, sorry, but the practical implementation of. So but we will, but it absolutely is, it is on the horizon, and probably in which, like, the best examples right now for voice tech are, so first of all, the NCBI's use case is a fantastic example. It's a really solid, good use, beneficial example with no limits. Other cases are performing simple operations. So here's the thing with voice tech, or actually any conversational AI. If you have to think about the technology, then you've lost the battle already. So and think about it in terms of, if I want to do a task, let's just say I want to do this task. So right now, I guarantee you that 90% of people who have a voice device use it for one of probably two things. Set the time when you're cooking, or listen to music. And they're super examples of efficient use of technology. I can just say without thinking, set a time for 10 minutes. That's when the spuds are boiling, right? Or play blah 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 on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. So those kind of thoughtless, as in things that require no thought, those thoughtless commands are super rich at the moment. Where it moves to beyond that, and it's kind of happening more quickly in the conversational messaging space as opposed to voice, actually text messaging, is sort of that concierge context awareness. So if you consider, travel is a good example. If you consider travel, there are 3 stages to any journey you take. There's the pre-travel stage where you're planning, you're booking, your payments, all that kind of stuff. There's what's called the day of travel, which is where you're getting to where you're going, going on a trip and so forth. And then there's the post-travel or the destination phase. You're at your destination, now what? So if you consider where the likes of voice tech or conversation tech in general works well, is that the system is aware of, okay, Sean is traveling to wherever, and now he's about to go, so let's give him some data on what he needs to do. Let's help him fulfill whatever service requirements he has. He needs to buy a ticket, he needs to book accommodation, he needs to arrange a taxi, whatever. And then on Sean's day of travel, we can start sending a message going, hey, Sean, the flight's changed. It's now going from gate 26 instead of gate 24. And then Sean gets there. It's kind of like, okay, now what? Well, here's the local things you can do in the area, because we know you're so busy planning the trip, you haven't actually thought about what you're doing when you get there. So having that sort of context-aware mindset through the stage of that journey just unlocks potential for that kind of concierge experience. Okay, and that's the kind of area where this stuff will ultimately open and expand. But not only, not purely in a conversation space. It's interactive and it's proactive. So if I'm traveling somewhere, for example, I want to get an alert on the day I'm traveling and say, hey, it's on now on this game instead. Or whenever I get there, I want an alert saying, hey, do you want to book this trip to the water park, because we know you've got a kid and you love water, blah blah blah. So that's where there's a massive potential that will be unlocked, and those interfaces will be completely compatible, really open. Be it I can answer on Alexa in the kitchen, I can take over the next part of my conversation on my phone by texting, and I can have the final part of the conversation on my watch by a voice rep.
So I suppose like technology is whatever we imagine it to be, and then build a process to actually create it. And I happened to be watching BBC Archive on YouTube last night to put out lots of cool segments, and they had actually Paul Daniels on it, the magician, would you believe? But he was programming an Atari 800, and he was writing his own computer game in BASIC, and he was just talking about getting all the magazines, trying to find which computer to use, and then finding programming quite difficult. And he got the BBC Micro's basic on basic, basically. And he was writing his own program for a game, but he also had a piece of code sent to him, and he started writing. It would use the port on the back of the Atari, and then you could set up pads around the house and create an alarm system and different functions for around the house. And that was back in, I think, 1981 or 1982. But that technology took a while to come about in different formats. And, you know, we all watched sci-fi TV shows of speaking to computers, and Alexa sort of replicates that. And whatever we have going forward, there's one speaking to me in the room now. I didn't know there was one here. There's always one about. But I suppose, like, we've worked together on a lot of projects, and we've even worked together on the project with JP and David, which is NCBI Live. So I know JP is going to ask David a fair amount of questions on that there. But Alan, if you're still available in cases, because I know you did a fair amount of work on that also with us.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hang on listening. Absolutely, thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
Sean. Thanks, Alan. I think it's fantastic as well, looking at the Smart Hub guys and looking at the potential there. I can say, I suppose, from linking in with service users over the last number of months since its release, and hearing them how we can, service users can contact our support lines, can essentially, avail of all the supports from NCBI through their smart speaker. It's fantastic, and I think the potential is endless with this technology. I think it segues quite nicely into our next conversation with David Redmond, insofar as recently David's going to talk to us about this. We have released an NCBI, the NCBI Live, which is a radio station that covers the very best content that we're producing here. And David's going to be telling us about this, but really it's very much thanks to Alan and his team that we were able to get NCBI Live implemented into the My NCBI Smart Hub skill. So it's another way of people to listen to that. But let's take a step back for a moment. I'm going to introduce now again David Redmond back onto the show there. Hello, David.
Hello, JP. How are you?
Great. Great to have you with us as well. So, David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all? I know your own personal interest in media, which you have.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I'm David Redmond. I'm based down here in Cork, and I suppose since a young age, I've always had an interest in media in some way, shape, or form. Media and technology were always my two interests, I guess. Growing up, I suppose I always knew then that I wanted a career in the media industry in some fashion. So I did radio broadcasting in college, which was great. I found ways of adapting. I have a visual impairment, so I found many ways of adapting that course and so on. And then when I was done the course, I was looking for little bits to do. And one of those projects that came up was NCBI Live. And we've been working on it now for over a year. But a few weeks ago, we finally launched it into the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just delighted to have it launched officially now. And David, could you tell us about what was the original inspiration behind NCBI? So how did it come to be? What gave you the idea?
So I suppose if I can't take full credit for the idea, it was an idea between myself and Patrick Hennessy. So Patrick also has a vision impairment. Patrick has no vision, but both of us were always, I suppose we're very similar in that we're both on the extreme end of media nerds, I would say. And I guess
self-professed, is it?
From there we did the same. Sorry?
Self-professed.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. There's no fighting it. There really isn't. But yeah, I suppose we're both media nerds in that regard, and we did the same broadcasting course down here in Cork. And I suppose one of the things we've been aware of really is radio stations that had existed in other countries for people with visual impairments. So the RNIB have an equivalent service. There's one in Australia. There's one over with ACB in the States. So these kind of concepts had existed previously. And it was one of these things where we said, hey, if they can do it, why can't we? So from there, we wrote a proposal, and eventually that proposal ended up with the labs team. And from there, we began work on the project. And a little over a year later, it launched, which was really cool, I must say.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic experience going through that from the original concept to development, and then it's launched only last month in July. There's obviously there was quite a lot involved in this project to get it up and running, and I know we worked quite closely on it over the last year, David, and of course with Patrick. There's, I say, quite a few things to consider, but just could you take us through like how NCBI Live was set up? So like what are the things that needs to be done and taken into consideration when setting up a radio station effectively?
Sure. Well, we've done this in a very modern way. So I suppose the traditional way that people would have set up a radio station would be to have studios and expensive transmission equipment and, computers, for days, endless computers running endless bits of software people have never even heard about. But we kind of went down a different road, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We decided we were going to do this in the cloud. So the way we've set it up technically is using a platform called radio.co, which essentially allows us to upload content, much how I suppose someone would upload a YouTube video. So we would just upload audio files, and those audio files then are played out on a schedule from the cloud. So we don't actually need to have any significant infrastructure on the NCBI end. So from there, we have the audio files being played from the cloud, and then people can access that through the website, through the NCBI Smart Hub, and it's been great. We don't have to have any expensive transmitter, which has been great. And the other advantage for us is that if you're broadcasting in terms of traditional FM, a lot of the times you need expensive licenses and all sorts of complicated stuff like that. So we've really, by being on the bleeding edge of this technology, we've been able to avoid a lot of those complications. So it's made the whole process a lot easier, even though there was a bit of experimentation with it initially.
And David, in terms of the editing itself, I know it does take time, because I'm involved in some audio and video editing myself from time to time in NCBI. And as I say, there's a bit of a time commitment there, and kind of tweaking, making sure it's 100% right before it's released. Is there quite a lot of work involved to this in this area around NCBI Live? So, for example, making sure that for scheduling, making sure something starts, it finishes at a certain time, everything like that. And also, as a follow-up question to that, like how accessible is some of the software that we're using to get the editing just right for NCBI Live?
Editing is one of these things where I think it's come a long way in many respects. It wasn't always that easy, being honest. I remember using Audacity a number of years ago, which will probably be the main free platform out there, the main free piece of software that people would use. And it was fine. I remember using it with Zoom Text back in the day, and it was manageable. I was able to manage it, but I wouldn't say it was efficient, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I suppose what I'm doing now, and I do this, for NCBI, and also as part of my day job, I work in a community station down here in Cork. I'm using a piece of software for iOS, actually, called Twisted Wave, which is fantastic because it's quite voiceover accessible. So it does allow you quite good flexibility. It's not perhaps as advanced as something like the real expensive stuff from Adobe, but it really gets the job done, and it is quite accessible. So it has been my tool of choice ever since I was in college now. But in general, I think the space is becoming more accessible. It's been great that there seems to be a great interest from people who have low vision in media and in audio production generally. So that has certainly enabled a lot of, evolution in the space, because, when there's a market, things get made accessible, which is great. Yeah. So it's certainly improving. It's certainly better than it was, for sure.
Excellent. And just in terms of the content then, David, so as you mentioned earlier, this is drawing up on content from some of the various podcasts in NCBI that we produce, amongst other things. So can you tell us a bit, what can someone expect to hear when they tune in to NCBI Live? So what kind of content can they expect to hear?
Yeah, so we decided definitely to walk before we can run.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, when you tune into NCBI Live, you're not going to hear something that like what you would hear on a traditional radio station. That wasn't our aim from the get-go. Maybe that's something that's down the road when, we have a massive budget to throw at it, who knows? But for now, what we're doing is really simple, but really effective. So there are 3 content strands. All of those strands are from pre-existing audio content which NCBI already had. So there's the Talking Technology podcast, which we're doing now. So you would also be able to hear these on NCBI Live. There is the Advocacy Talks content. So that's coming from NCBI's advocacy team. They have a podcast series as well. So we've integrated that into Live. And then there's the more general NCBI podcast, which is focusing on people's life stories, really, their backgrounds. So, what's it like to be a lawyer with a visual impairment? What's it like to be a teacher with a visual impairment? So, things like that. So we've brought those 3 content strands together and other little miscellaneous bits of audio content from NCBI. We've converted them into what is at the moment a 3-hour loop. And yeah, people can tune in any time of the day or night and they can hear that 3-hour loop. And we try to update it on a regular basis. And who knows where it'll take us? Who knows? We'll try expand in the future, and based on people's feedback too.
It all sounds really good, Dave. So how can someone tune in?
Yeah, so there are 2 core ways that people can tune in. There is ncbi.ie/live is the first way. It's all fully accessible as you'd expect and works perfectly. And then there is on the Smart Hub. So if you enable the My NCBI skill, which if you haven't done so, you can do from your Alexa app or on your Google Home or any of those devices. You can tell that to play NCBI Live, and it will do it just as you said. So yeah, it's really easy to listen, and we'd encourage people to have a listen, and feel free to send us feedback. We want to improve it. We might not get everything right straight away, but we'll strive to improve it, So
absolutely. And Dave, another question is, where do you see NCBI Live going in the future? So we have this station now set up, and it's playing in these 3-hour loops, and the content, as you mentioned, is being continuously updated or regularly updated. The next step, so where would you like to see NCBI Live going? So is it, for example, the pre-recorded content to potentially live interviews and requests from listeners, that kind of thing?
I mean, there's really endless potential. Like going back to what I was saying earlier, if we look across the pond to what they're doing in the UK or in the States, like if you look at I believe it's called Connect Radio now from the RNIB, their service is much like a traditional radio station with fully staffed with a breakfast show, talk shows, and they've got hundreds of thousands of listeners, not just people with visual impairment. They've grown beyond that now almost. So there is endless potential for where this could go. but we're conscious to, walk before we can run, for sure. But I'm absolutely excited about where it could go, because we can start, increasing potentially the length of the loop and adding some exclusive content to NCBI Live. And then if that really works, who knows what the future may bring.
Excellent. Well, I have to commend, David, your work on this project over the last year. I know you've been working hard at it, and it's fantastic to have it launched now in the last month. And just as a reminder to people listening in, that they can tune into NCBI Live through the NCBI website or through the NCBI Smart Hub, which is activated using a smart speaker like Alexa or Google Home. So, David, thanks very much for telling us about NCBI Live today, and for all the great work on getting it launched last month. Well done.
Thank you, JP. And can I just say as well quickly, just a massive, massive well done to everybody on the labs team, JP, Sean, all the team there, everyone who worked on Smart Hub as well, everyone who worked on the website, the communications team. There's really, Patrick and myself pitched this idea a year ago, but it was never something that realistically we were going to be able to pull off on our own. And in fairness to everyone at NCBI, a huge amount of work went into this behind the scenes. It took quite a while, and there's been massive commitment from everybody, and it's just been fantastic. And it's shown, from my point of view, just how open NCBI were to having input and suggestions from service users, that we brought it this far and that we launched the service. There's great credit due to everybody who was involved from your side as well. So credit to you. You can give yourselves a pat on the back, because it's well deserved. It really, really is, guys.
Thanks very much, David, and thank you for giving us an insight again into NCBI Live. Okay, great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, just a few notes, guys, reminders as well before we finish up today. So as a reminder, if you require any technical support from the NCBI Labs team, you can contact our help desk on 1800 911 110, or you can send an email to labs@ncbi.ie, or to avail of the wider services from NCBI, you can call us on 1800 911 250 or email info@ncbi.ie. Now, if you'd like to make a donation to support NCBI and help keep our services going and our podcasts, you can visit us at donate.ncbi.ie. So what's coming up in future shows? So over the next few weeks, we'll be joined, some of the next few shows, we're going to be joined by Sarah Herlinger, who is Apple's Senior Director of Global Accessibility Policy and Initiatives. Looking forward to that interview. We're going to be joined by Stephen Scott, who is from the Blind Guys Talk Tech podcast. And we also have someone from RTE, Oren O'Neill, who's going to be joining us from RTE to talk about the RTE Player app and audio description within RTE Television. Next show will be taking place Tuesday, September 6th. Okay. If you would like to sign up to our technology newsletter, then you can keep up to date with the latest trends and developments in technology for people with sight loss. And that can be done by visiting our website, ncbi.ie, or sending an email to labs@ncbi.ie. So all that's left for me to do today is to thank our guests, Alan, Kieran, and David Redmond for joining us. So thanks very much, guys, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Both myself and Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. So take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we look forward to having you back with us for the next Talking Technology podcast with NCBI Labs.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Technology podcast with NCBI Labs. If you would like to support our show, you can visit donate.ncbi.ie. The NCBI Labs Talking Technology podcast is proudly sponsored by IA Labs, the market leader in the provision of digital accessibility services.